Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a review of Tarzan Battle for Pellucidar. This is a relatively new novel from Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated. It came out maybe a year or two ago, and I've already reviewed the first novel in this series, which is Carson and Venus, Edge of All Worlds, and gave my general thoughts on this series of novels. But just to sum it up, this is part of the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe, which is putting out new works of Edgar Rice Burroughs' characters, and it is part of the Swords of Eternity story arc. And so that began with Carson and Venus, Edge of All Worlds, and then this is the second novel, Tarzan Battle for Pellucidar, and the third novel is John Carter, Gods of the Forgotten, and the last novel, which hasn't come out yet, will be Victory Harbin, Fires of Halos, focusing on a new character named Victory Harbin. So these novels are mostly self-contained, but they are connected by some things that they're hinting at, and mainly by a subplot about Jason Gridley and Victory Harbin, who have been displaced in time and space and are appearing in different worlds that Edgar Rice Burroughs created. And Victory's story is mainly being told through these novelettes, these kind of backup stories in the back of the novels. And so in this novel, it's Victory Harbin in the Land That Time Forgot, written by Mike Wolfer, who did the American Mythology comics and is a huge fan of the Land That Time Forgot. And I'm very happy to say that on the Edgar Rice Burroughs Universe Canon website that I looked at this morning, I spotted that he is actually going to be writing the final novelette in the Victory Harbin novel, and it's going to be called Victory Harbin Rescue on Xandar, and I'm super looking forward to it. So do you have to have read the Carson and Venus novel to read this one? No. The only real thing that it follows up on is the novelette in the back of Victory Harbin, and that does a great job of summing up what happened in the first novelette. So you should read it. It's good, but you don't have to. And so do you need to have read other Tarzan novels or Pellucidar novels to understand this? I would say no for the main story and main characters, but there's some kind of minor references going on, and we'll talk about those at the end. This is available in softcover, which you're looking at, also hardcover, Kindle, and audiobooks, and it's available to order from pretty much any place you get new books from. However, if you order it from EdgarRiceBurroughs.com, they'll throw in a free trading card, and this novel comes with this gorgeous card of Jane. And I'm a little surprised that Jane's on here because she doesn't really have much of a role in the novel. I'm surprised a character that has a more active role didn't get on the card, like Suzanne or Sita the Savage or somebody like that. That being said, it is absolutely gorgeous Mike Wolfer artwork, and I love this image so much I actually have it on a t-shirt. You can get it as a t-shirt on Amazon.com. And let's talk about this absolutely gorgeous cover. We got Tarzan, we've got Suzanne, who is a brand new character. That's Tarzan's granddaughter. And yes, that dinosaur has a saddle on it. Yes, and we can see the beautiful prehistoric world of Pellucidar in the background. And the cover wraps around, and we can see the airship that Tarzan rode in on. And it's just such a gorgeous, gorgeous image. I actually like this image so much, I actually have it as a painting. You can get it as a painting on iCanvas.com, and I have it hanging over my kitchen table. Unfortunately, there are no illustrations on the inside, but we do have this wonderful map of Pellucidar, which comes in handy because people are always getting lost in Pellucidar. All right, so let's set some expectations about what this novel is and what it isn't. So when I was talking about Carson and Venus, when I was doing that review, that novel is really kind of an all-star best of sort of novel. You've got all his supporting cast, you've got all these different aliens he's met in the past that make Venus so cool and interesting. If someone asked me, what is Carson and Venus about, I would just hand them that novel and it would tell them everything they needed to know. That is not what this novel is. This novel is not set in Africa. His family does not appear in person in the main story. There's only a very brief Gridley wave call to them to say goodbye on the way to Pellucidar. Paul Darnot does not appear. The Wazari do not appear and are only very briefly mentioned. And there are no black African characters at all in this novel. That's a little bit surprising considering, Burroughs Inc., just like everybody else, is trying to kind of expand and diversify their lineup of heroes. And a novel this prominent is a great way to do that. You know, they're building up Jane as this action hero in comic books that are available on EdgarRiceBurroughs.com, and they're great, but this just seems like this would have been a good way to kind of plug that, you know, to kind of establish Jane as an action hero in the novels themselves. But I guess, you know, it just didn't fit in with this particular story. I'm sure there are plenty of opportunities, but, you know, sometimes it just feels like the supporting cast just gets shafted. I mean, there's just so much potential there. I think the Wazari or other African characters that Burroughs wrote could probably fill novels by themselves. And, you know, I guess you could say that Burroughs himself oftentimes didn't use the supporting cast either, right? The last half of those novels, you know, you could go through an entire novel and you would never see any of the characters I just mentioned. So I guess maybe they're just keeping that tradition going. And so what is this novel about? It is Tarzan going back to the Earth's core, which is called Pellucidar. Pellucidar is this prehistoric world inside of the Earth. And so imagine the Earth is kind of this hollow sphere. Pellucidar lines the inside of it. And so it's lit by this eternal noonday sun, so it's always daylight, never nighttime. Kind of very disorienting, hard to tell time in Pellucidar. Hard to get your direction to because there are no stars or anything like that. The sun never moves. So it can be a very disorienting place. And so this novel is set during World War II, so the villains are Nazis. And yeah, I know Nazis have been overdone. Everyone and their mama has fought World War II Nazis. But it's kind of cool here because this is the first time in canon that Tarzan has fought Nazis, or at least I think so. But these aren't just Nazis. These are Nazis who've come to the Earth's core, allied themselves with Mahar and a lost civilization in hopes of conquering the world. We've got David Enos, king of the Pellucidarian Empire, marching his army across the land to face them. Meanwhile, Tarzan is gathering a crew that includes Jason Gridley and his granddaughter Suzanne, who is a total badass, to get in an airship, go down to Pellucidar, and kill him some Nazis. That is a great premise for a story. One thing to note, this is a very violent novel. Some of the early Burroughs novels could be very violent, and this is as violent as any of those ever got. There's one scene where it feels like Tarzan is trying out Mortal Kombat finishing moves on the Nazis. So it's actually a pretty long journey to get to Pellucidar, and there is a lot of exposition. And so what the novel does is it kind of front loads it with these chapters to kind of tease you about what's going to happen, right? We have this great opening chapter to get you really pumped, establishing Nazis are targeting these Stone Age people. And then we have 2 chapters that are really intense, establishing our main characters. And then we get to, you know, the exposition and the traveling and all that stuff. And so what that does is it keys you up at the beginning. It shows you what the writer can do and what you're going to get on the other side of that journey, right? When you get to Pellucidar, you know stuff's going to be good because you've already got that tease in the first chapters, right? But I will also say that the journey and the exposition was all very well done. It was all pleasant to read. I never struggled, you know, reading it. And then when you get to Pellucidar, though, the book just takes off. It goes into these alternating chapters between Tarzan and Suzanne, who are your co-stars. And I got to tell you, it is just super intense. You get to a cliffhanger with one, and then you go through a chapter with the other one with another cliffhanger, and you're just, you know, you're just always on the edge to find out what happens next to both of them. Though I will be honest, and I'll say that I definitely was more engaged with Suzanne. I was just really like, oh my God, Tarzan, hurry up. I want to see what happens to your granddaughter. But she's a fantastic character. I love her to death. I wouldn't have minded if the whole novel was hers. But she gets enough in here that it's almost like she has her own novelette. And by the way, I wonder if Suzanne's name means something in the language of the great apes. I was just noticing that the last syllable of her name is Zan, which is the same, of course, as Tarzan. And Zan in the language of the great apes means skin. So I sort of wonder if Sue might mean something. And Jason Gridley and Victory Harbin are there, except this is set in the past before they got sucked into the portal and got teleported all over time and space. So Jason Gridley is here as part of the crew. He's well fleshed out. I like the character. Victory Harbin actually appears as a child. And this is fleshing out her backstory, and she gets a little bit of a subplot there. It doesn't interrupt or slow down anything. It works very well. I really enjoyed it. So this novel is actually taking place in a new region of Pellucidar that has been previously unexplored in novels. And so the new lost civilization that they established, that it allies itself with the Nazis, there's not a whole lot to it. It feels more like something you might see in a Tarzan movie than a Tarzan novel. But that being said, it is supposed to be mysterious. It's setting up mysteries that will be resolved in later books, so that may be why we don't know quite as much about it as we normally would if Edgar Rice Burroughs was writing the novel. And there's a new tribe of humans that we meet that I think was very fleshed out and definitely felt like they could have been in a Burroughs novel, and their interactions with Suzanne were fantastic. The main villain, the Nazi who was in charge, he's basically there just to be evil. He's not a particularly deep or interesting villain, but he gets the job done as far as creating an epic threat. The final battle, I mean, there's a plot twist, and yeah, there is some epic stuff going on, but it feels a little anticlimactic compared to the build-up. But that being said, I feel like this is about the journey and not the destination, right? And boy, is that journey just amazing to see Suzanne go through all that stuff as a Burroughs hero. Like the full 9 yards of Burroughs heroism is just really awesome. And Tarzan does some fantastic stuff in this too, and it's just a great, great journey to get there. I felt this was an amazingly written novel, and I really do recommend it, but there were a few things I did find distracting, but I'm going to get to those in a minute. I want to get through all my positives first, so I'm going to talk about that novelette by Mike Wolfer. And so it's set in the land of time forgot, and basically it's there if you read that main novel and you were like, that's nice, but how about some more dinosaurs? So the novelette has Victory Harbin meeting Sita the Savage, who is a character created by Mike Wolfer in the Land That Time Forgot comics from American mythology. It was well written. It's very impressive, all the different emotions and all the different things that Victory goes through in just, I think it was about 40 pages. I mean, she forms a bond with Sita. I mean, it's very quickly done, but it just feels like very natural pacing. And then, of course, because this is part of this story arc, there is going to be a plot twist here. There is going to be kind of a cryptic mystery thrown in there. But I thought it worked really well. I mean, it was odd, but I understood what was going on. You know, an antagonist is after a protagonist. I understand that. I understand the questions that this antagonist brings up. Like, who is this antagonist? Why are they after Victory? Why are they saying the things that they are saying, right? And these were actually very intriguing things that I look forward to figuring out at some point in one of these novels. And by the way, the American mythology comics that Wolfer's worked on are fantastic, and some of them tie directly into the novel. And so Pellucidar Across Savage Seas tells the story of how Victory Harbin's mom met her dad. There is the origin of Sita the Savage, which is told in a Sita the Savage two-part miniseries or in this Land That Time Forgot annual. And then there is a miniseries called The Land That Time Forgot Fearless, and this is how she met the two main heroes of the original Land That Time Forgot novel. And so, yes, I think this novel is fantastic cover to cover. And by the way, be sure to look in the back for the Quantum Interlude. It's kind of a post-credit scene in the middle of like the ads in the back. They'll give you a teaser as to what's to come in some of the other novels. But let me talk about the thing that I thought was a little bit distracting. And so that would be the amount of references to past novels in this work. I think the novel and the novelette do a fantastic job of explaining backstory to the reader and orienting them and telling them everything they need to know to understand the main actions of what's going on and who the characters are. And beyond that, there's some great instances where backstory is very naturally used in places that it should come up. For instance, Suzanne is in a particularly intense moment and she thinks back to her parents, and her family, and it really helps sell the character, and it's a wonderful scene, right? And there are instances where sometimes people will mention lost cities and Tarzan will think, oh, I've been to those, and will list some of the impronounceable places that he's been in past novels. And all those work very well, and they all feel very natural. However, the main novel goes well beyond that, it feels like, and just is kind of constantly throwing these references and Easter eggs at the reader, and inevitably some of them are just going to feel kind of awkward. Now, sometimes when this is done, there are these helpful annotations at the bottom, so at least the new reader knows, like, oh, okay, it's a reference to that, which is helpful. So part of the reason for these extra references, like that prolonged history of airships in the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe, is that they're trying to reference books that weren't written by Edgar Rice Burroughs in order to make them official or canon. And the funny thing about that is in chapter 5, you're going to see a couple annotations telling you about books that it's referring to, but if you go on edgarriceburroughs.com and look at the list of books that are in canon, they're not on that list. What I've been told is that they're working on adding them to that list and actually adding them to the store so that, if you become curious about those books, you can go to edgarriceburroughs.com and get them. But the thing about the references is there are just so many of them. There's just some of them that a new reader is just going to have no context for. There's a couple jokes early on about Burroughs' tropes. One of them, I think, may be Jane's only spoken line in the main novel. But I mean, a new reader just is not going to know what that's referring to, and they're just going to kind of shrug and move on to the next paragraph. And that's okay. We're listening into other people's conversations. That's essentially what readers do in novels. And sometimes people say things in the conversations you eavesdrop on, you just have no idea what they're talking about, right? But there's some things I think that they probably should be told what you're talking about. One of those was the Wazari reference, and I just don't think a new reader would have any idea who the Wazari is. And that's a shame. They do get an idea that they're black people in Africa, I think, but beyond that, I just don't think they would know what the relationship is with Tarzan. But the thing that even got me was at the end. The thing about how the glowing thing ties into other glowing things. I think this is probably related to the Swords of Eternity arc. And it was an annotation to, this novel not written by Burroughs that I've never read. And I tried to read the paragraph in the novel, and still tried to understand it. And I just couldn't. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what the question is. I certainly don't know what the answer could be. And I felt like I was taking a college course I didn't have all the prerequisites for. And I'm just like, I actually know a few things about Burroughs. I just can't imagine how a new reader would feel. But I consider all those references to just be kind of extra stuff and not necessarily all that important to the main story that I care about and that I bought the novel for. I'm there for Tarzan, I'm there for Suzanne, I'm there for the supporting cast, I'm there for the people of Pellucidar. I'm not necessarily there for like glowing things and the secret origin of everything Edgar Rice Burroughs ever created. Now, I'm sure those are going to create some fantastic storylines. It'll probably be a great thing in like the Victory Harbin novel, but right now, that's a Tarzan novel. That's what I got it for, right? I didn't necessarily get it for all the continuity minutia and all the Easter eggs and all that. And I hope that's how new readers take it. I hope new readers also understand that other Tarzan novels don't have all these references and that it is a very accessible series that, you can pick up any novel and enjoy. And that is pretty much true of Burroughs' work across the board. And so that's my non-spoiler thoughts on the novel. I do tentatively plan to do a separate video on the references in this, and I will go into spoilers and tell you what they are and what they're referring to. And that's going to include a Easter egg in there. It's a name that's mentioned twice that made my head want to explode because it's the biggest change I've seen to the Tarzan mythos ever. All right, like and subscribe for more videos, and until next time, see ya.